The answer is no one is there, Reiner. No one is there. They don't hear you. The wind is blowing the words back into your mouth. But Rilke is the master of the German subjunctive. He's probably has more rhymes ending on the subjunctive than you can believe. You know, like the Panther poem, which is rather a marvelous one from the Book of Images, where his glance is seen as the bars have passed over across his face so often, across his look so often, that he thinks there are 1,000 bars and there is no world. You know, you have this thing, and the German is wonderful as it ends on a subjunctive passage where it says, "Ihr müsst also bis 1,000 Stäbe geben und hinter diesen Stäben keiner Welt." It seems to him as if there were 1,000 bars, and behind those bars there was no world. Now, as it were, is Rilke disclaiming his understanding of the Panther, which I think is a very honorable thing to be doing. And I think he's always willing to, all but the Duino elegies, he's willing to surrender. And even there, the first line itself of the first elegy it has a subjunctive in it. It's wer wenn ich schreie, and the schreie is subjunctive. Wer wenn ich schreie, hört mich aus den Engelordnungen. And he starts in the subjunctive and he never gets past it because it doesn't exist. So in effect, my taste for European poetry is probably because I was unsatisfied with what was going on in America. And it could be German, it could be French, or Italian, or Spanish. Spanish was also a language that we found poets liberating ourselves from. Jerome was very attracted to Lorca, and for me, Lorca was too many almond blossoms and orange trees. But I loved Neruda, and you know, Jerry did a beautiful translation of I'm called Walking Around. I'm tired of walking around, which is a terrific poem. Of Lorca's, the one poem that always I remember with great pleasure was the death of the bullfighter, which was actually rather brilliant about the death of his friend. So, again, I would scavenge any language I could handle for a poet to put together a tradition that would be secularist and brilliant.
It reminds me of what Emmanuel Locard says of his desire to translate other poets and American poets, creating something or having something appear in the French language that was not possible before the translation, and therefore sort of gaining ground on the French language, but from another perspective, and translating the American poets, because this was language he would never have access to. He would never have had access to other than that. So it's just the issue of translation in his work.
I understand it. I always said that. I mean, I remember saying as a slight provocation of my friend Annette Michelson, who was a Francophile much greater than I am. I said she was talking about the French language and the French tradition. I said, yeah. I said, well, it really was okay. I mean, but once they got past Villon, it lost its way to the Pléiades, who are the most boring poets in the world. And I said, you know, like the language went the wrong way. If it went the way of Rabelais and Villon, the literary tradition would have been stronger. The French poetic tradition, it managed to produce some really great poets, but at a terrible expense. That is, the vernacular was held at bay in some sense really all the time, even in the kind of weirdness in which the past definite seems to be a mark of the problem. There's a certain real problem that French poetry had, that it couldn't really speak the vernacular honestly, because the Academy is looking over its shoulder. And in spite of which there were terrific poets. Like, for example, Un coup de day is a wonderful poem, but it's almost always misunderstood anyway. Basically, it's a poem about shipwreck and probability. And you say, how do you say probability? Well, the answer is that the title isn't what they think it is. When you say "un coup d'idée," you mean one throw of the dice will not abolish chance. It's not a throw, it's one throw. And the answer is, in probability theory, that's absolutely the case. One throw of the dice is irrelevant to probability. It's totally, and the shipwreck, the shipwreck that is basically flirted with in the poem is essentially like the shipwreck that celebrated or mourned by Hopkins in the Wreck of Deutschland. And I always thought that there was a relationship between the two poets, which I don't know if there's a scholarly backup for that. But I always thought they were dealing with the same naval, the same marine disaster. And what is happening in the French poem is an attempt to deal with how do you deal with the contingent, the profound, terrifying contingent. And that poem's power resides in the notion of you realizing everything that he talks about is contingency. In which case there is no telos and there is no systematic purpose of things. And the religious reading of the Hopkins is a Jesuit reading it in a way that tries to make sense of it in Catholic terms. And the French tries not to make sense of it, which is a superb version of how to deal with it. How do you deal with the shipwreck? It's like, it reminds me of the account given by Thoreau of going out to see the ship that was returning Margaret Fuller to the United States with her husband and her children, and the ship was capsized off the coast of Rockaway, I believe, they couldn't get help to it in time, and everybody drowned. And the accident of them being in an unavailable rescue party. I mean, Thoreau records standing there and gasping at the horror of not being able to help, which is different and more powerful than Hopkins. Hopkins is a beautiful poet, but he was hampered by Catholicism because it nailed him downward from dealing with the true horror, which has nothing to do with anything reconcilable with belief. The tragedy is the tragedy, that this waste of human life based on technological inadequacy. It's like when a space capsule fails, some contractor has done what he usually does. It's like we've been told that nuclear energy is possible because if you seal something in cans that will in fact keep it protected for 2,000 to 3,000 years, it will be fine. But what contractor will guarantee you 2,000 to 3,000 years of safety? And who will be there to take his place, to replace him as the guarantor when he dies at the age of 50 or 60? And there is still 1,900 or 4,000 years to go. So, again, you can see my taste is resolutely secular. And I love the sound of Hopkins. Hopkins' ability to experience something like Margaret, Golden Grove on leaving is a beautiful, beautiful image, and so are many of the sonnets. But he was an inventor within a kind of decayed medium. In a certain sense, the idea of writing a sonnet is absurd. And Hopkins was able to leap over that obstacle by a kind of mad metric. That is, he fought one metric with another metric, and they fought it out completely. And the Hopkins-Wilder metric wins. But at the level of what seems to be the content, Catholicism wins and Hopkins loses. 3-0. That's the Trinity.
And, go on.
I was wondering, could you tell us more about your interest in machines?
In machines?
Yeah. Talk about
Well, I grew up with them. They were like pets that I, adopted and took in stray pets. I also had jobs where I was paid to repair machinery. And you see, when I was a kid, I mean, like high school age, I had two alternative ideas to do. I would either be the one idea that was clearest to me was that I would be an inventor. I wanted to be an inventor, and that's why I had gone to a high school that was an engineering school. There were 3 special high schools that I could have chosen to go to for special high-class education. One was Brooklyn Tech, one was